Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel. We're going to continue the album anniversary series to start 2025, taking a look today at albums turning 50 this year, counting down my top 20 favorite rock and metal releases of 1975. Number 20, let's get things started here with Rock and Roll by John Lennon. Pretty straightforward and groovy record here. It just feels like a jam session. This album definitely does set itself apart from the other Lennon solo albums up to this point in the sense that it's not Lennon trying to make any social or political statements, right? There's no Yoko on this record either. It's just John Lennon playing, covering some of the late 50s and early 60s songs that influenced him, and so I dig that quite a bit. It has this laid-back kind of a feel to it. The album's biggest weakness is definitely its production. It was produced by Phil Spector. Lennon worked with him initially on this album, and Spector was not reliable at all during the recording sessions, even once disappearing for months on end with the album's master tapes, and so, yeah, the sound is kind of a mess. This is definitely an album I think would benefit most from, one of those ultimate mixes, getting a proper sound, refurbishment, I think, but, of course, if they did that, they'd have to pay, once again, royalties to all the artists Lennon covered on here, and speaking of, Lennon had to include 3 Morris Levy-owned songs on the album as part of a copyright infringement settlement going back to Come Together from Abbey Road, sounding a little too similar to Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me. This album not talked about nearly as much as some of Lennon's other solo work, but I really enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. You have the cover of Bebop Alula. Of course, you have Stand By Me. You have the Little Richard medley of Rip It Up and Ready Teddy as well. So there's some good stuff on here. It's a fun album, just Lennon playing the oldies at the same time, trying to get Big 7 Music Corp off his back. So with that in mind, coming in at number 20 here, let's go with Rock and Roll by John Lennon. Number 19, let's go with Bandolier, the 5th studio album by the Welsh rock band Budgie, way underrated band. The first Budgie LP to feature drummer Steve Williams, who thereafter would appear on all of Budgie's releases alongside Burke Shelley. And Iron Maiden's cover of I Can't See My Feelings actually ended up being my introduction to Budgie, and the original song, of course, appears on Bandolier. So this is the first Budgie album I listened to in its entirety, and it's a great record. There's some absolutely killer stuff on here, like Breaking All the House Rules, Slip Away, Who Do You Want for Your Love, and more. Like I said, Budgie are so underrated and, should have been much bigger than they ended up being. This album charted at number 36 in the UK and didn't even chart in the US, which is just criminal. For my number 18, I'm going to go with Dressed to Kill by Kiss. Kiss's first 3 studio albums are marred by flat production, but the material is still great stuff. And Dressed to Kill is full of gems outside of, Rock and Roll All Night. The original lineup here really coming together with some great, I'd say, hidden gems and deep cuts in their catalog, because that's what they turned into. A lot of these songs are overlooked in the Kiss discography, especially as far as I'm concerned. Songs like Room Service, Two-Timer, Ladies in Waiting, Getaway, Rock Bottom, Come On and Love Me, Anything for My Baby, She, my favorite Kiss song of all time, Love for All I Can, very Beatles-inspired as well, and then, of course, like I said, you have Rock and Roll All Night. But a lot of really great underrated songs on here in addition to that. And, Kiss were never going to be the most technically proficient band in the room. They were never going to write the most complex material. But the original lineup had amazing chemistry and were on a run of great albums from their debut through Dynasty. Yes, I said Dynasty. I think that's a great album as well. And, some of those later 70s Kiss albums, it gets kind of murky as to which tracks Ace and Peter actually play on. But, the early Kiss albums where all 4 guys are playing together, trying to make it big, captured, that energy, that magic for sure, and so it's on display here on Dressed to Kill. Maybe a little harder to find due to the poor production, but a great record nonetheless, and not their only release from 1975, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Coming in at number 17, let's go with Minstrel in the Gallery by Jethro Tull. It's the follow-up to War Child from 1974, and I like the band's change in direction on this record, reverting back to a mix of electric and acoustic songs in a similar vein as records like Benefit, Aqualung, and Thick as a Brick. Also, the final Tull album to feature bassist Jeffrey Ammond, who left the band after the completion of the album's tour. And the lyrics on this album are really intriguing to me. Some really cynical stuff here written by Ian Anderson, who was going through a divorce at the time of the album's recording. That may have, been a reason for the album's attitude, but probably their best record since Thick as a Brick a few years earlier. Not a knock on Living in the Past or Passion Play, but I just think this record is a stronger and more elaborate one with more of a personal touch as well. Number 16, we have Captain, Fantastic, and the Brown Dirt Cowboy by Elton John. A massive commercial success for Elton John in 1975, and I love the concept on this record, kind of a self-autobiographical story of Elton John and longtime lyricist Bernie Taupin. And though they would all appear on later albums, this was the last album of the 1970s to feature the original lineup of the Elton John Band. Some standouts here include the title track, Tower of Babel, Someone Save My Life Tonight, and Curtains. And Elton would revisit this concept again in 2006 with the sequel, The Captain and the Kid, which is also a good record, but it's got nothing on the original, my number 16 here on the list. AC/DC hit the Australian rock scene with 2 albums in 1975, their debut, High Voltage, and their sophomore record, my number 15 on the list, TNT, and material from both would be combined in 1976 on the international release of High Voltage, but that was 76, that doesn't count for this video. Instead, I'm going to focus on Australian TNT here, which I think is significantly stronger than the Australian High Voltage, which would be their debut album in Australia and New Zealand as well, featuring classic early Bon Scott tracks on TNT like It's a Long Way to the Top, The Jack, Livewire. High Voltage, which appears on TNT and not the album High Voltage, but whatever. Rocker, and a really enjoyable cover of School Days by Chuck Berry as well. This was the band's first release with bassist Mark Evans and drummer Phil Rudd, though the last 2 tracks featured George Young and Tony Correnti, both of whom previously appeared on the debut from earlier in the year. But great stuff here, early AC/DC from the Bon Scott era. I dig it quite a bit. The Bon era is my favorite era of AC/DC, and this is some really early stuff from the band before they went international. Gonna go with the Australian release of TNT for number 15 here on the list. Following things up here at number 14, let's go with The Who by Numbers. And, what's wild about this record here by The Who is that it was written during a time when Pete Townsend was going through significant writer's block, and they still ended up with this track-by-track masterpiece. The album delves a bit deeper lyrically, than the previous Who releases, with more personal, introspective lyrics on display, and honestly, I think it's some of Pete Townsend's finest songwriting, and I really love tracks on here like Squeezebox, Slip Kid, However Much I Booze, Dreaming from the Waist, Imagine a Man as well. Great deep cut, Imagine a Man. They didn't play live until 2019, which is pretty crazy. Excellent stuff here by The Who. My number 14 on the list. Great stuff. Awesome songwriting. Like I said, I think it's one of Pete Townsend's finest hours as a songwriter as well. So, nuts to think that he went into this with a bit of writer's block, and then they came out with an absolute classic nonetheless in 75. Number 13, I'm going to go with Horses by Patti Smith. Such an original record here by Patti Smith on her solo debut, mixing poetry with rock music and really exploring the minimalistic avant-garde side of the underground formative years of punk. It's very less is more with simple chord progressions and excellent lyrics, lyrics that are rooted mostly in Smith's own personal experiences. And some standout tracks include Gloria, Redondo Beach, Free Money, Kimberly, and more. An absolutely crucial album to the rise of, the New York City punk rock scene, which was a little less underground after the release of Horses, coming in at number 13 here on the list. Number 12, like I said, Kiss came out with 2 albums in 1975. Also here we have Kiss Alive. Now here's the thing with Alive. Love it, right? A lot of great recordings here of classic Kiss songs, but here's the thing. It's not actually live. We know that now. It's not an actual live album. As a matter of fact, the only thing live about it was Peter Criss' drumming. Kiss were lying to us all the way back in 1975. But that being said, it's an incredible representation of what a Kiss live show in the mid-70s would have sounded like. And it features some of my favorite versions of classic Kiss tracks, like Deuce, Strutter, Hotter Than Hell, Firehouse, Come On and Love Me, Parasite, She, Watching You, 100,000 Years, Rock Bottom, Black Diamond, of course, Rock and Roll All Night, the superior version on this record. And so, acknowledging that it's not a real live album, I do prefer many of the recordings of the tracks on this record to the original that they appeared on. Like I was saying, with Dress to Kill, the first 3 Kiss studio albums have production flatter than cardboard, and so this album definitely does breathe new life into a lot of those Kiss tracks, and in the process breathe new life into Kiss and to Casablanca Records, kind of saving them here with Alive, which would become a massive success for the band, kind of propelling Kiss to the next level, making them household names. And so, like every Kiss fan, I love Alive, but I'm also not going to pretend that it's a real live album like Kiss tried to sell us on for so many years. Still, it's a great listen, even once you find out it's not actually live. Some great stuff on here by Kiss, and a lot of superior versions of classic tracks from the first 3 records. Coming in at number 11, let's go with Force It by UFO. In the midst of their creative prime, UFO had the seemingly impossible task of trying to follow up Phenomenon from 1970 74, but that's just what they did here with Force It in 75. Their first album to chart in the United States. It's great 70s British heavy metal on display here, and highly influential to a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal bands to be coming up onto the scene in the next 5 years or so. The Michael Schenker era of UFO always guaranteed some superb guitar work, and I love his playing on Force It. Some standouts for me include Shoot Shoot, High Flyer, Let It Roll, Out on the Street, and Mother Mary. And honestly, I'm not sure if I can pick my favorite UFO album from this era of the band, but Force It would definitely be up there for sure. I'm in the process of adding UFO to my collection. Don't have Force It yet, but need to pick it up next time I go to the record store. Just phenomenal stuff here by UFO. Coming in at number 11. Wanted to put it close to the top 10. Got to put Force It here. Fantastic stuff. We move into the top 10 here. Coming in at number 10, let's go with Young Americans by David Bowie. This album marked a departure for Bowie from the glam rock sound of previous releases like Diamond Dogs, Aladdin Sane, and Ziggy Stardust, moving for a more soulful R&B approach, and Bowie himself referred to this album's sound as plastic soul. It's yet another example of Bowie being the musical chameleon, as he's referred, reinventing himself and blending into any style he decides to dive into. And this is a very fun listen. I love the title track, of course, Fame, the great collaboration with John Lennon. You have Win, and then what I think is a very underrated cover of Across the Universe, which also features Lennon on backing vocals. So Lennon helping to cover his own song. And you'd think that by 75, with rock and roll and now this, Lennon would be sick and tired of covers by the end of the year. But geez, man. All in all, this is classic Bowie from the mid-70s here. Kind of in an interesting position, an interesting time period as well. This is Bowie post-glam rock, but pre-Thin White Duke era. So a very unique and vibrant album in the Bowie catalog for sure. Coming in at number 10, got to go with Young Americans. Number 9, let's go with Fly By Night by Rush. Rush made 2 albums in 1975, the other being Caress of Steel, but I think Fly By Night is the much stronger of the two. The first Rush album featured drummer and lyricist Neil Peart, and also the first Rush record to feature a more progressive rock-focused sound and approach that we equate them with today, but it's contrary to their debut, which is much more of a textbook hard rock album. Peart took over as the band's main lyricist, bringing in fantastical and philosophical lyrical themes that really elevated the band's songwriting, and The Professor was officially in, and as a result, Rush avoided the sophomore slump with a phenomenal second album. My number 9 here on the list, let's go with Fly By Night. Number 8, let's go with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the debut album by Rainbow here. After departing from Deep Purple, Ritchie Blackmore formed Rainbow, recruiting former Elf vocalist Ronnie James Dio. And with the exception of 2 covers, Still I'm Sad and Black Sheep of the Family, Dio and Ritchie wrote every song here on the record, and it's a shame that nobody could seem to work with Ritchie or Ronnie for, a long period of time, because the chemistry of the original Rainbow lineup was phenomenal, and the album showcases some of Ritchie Blackmore's finest guitar work, and of course introduced the world to Ronnie James Dio on a much larger scale in his powerful voice. And this album, in my opinion, is 100 times better than what Deep Purple were doing at the time with Come Taste the Band, although a lot of people really enjoy that album. I could never take to it personally. I'll take Rainbow's debut over it any day of the week, with standouts here on this record like Man on the Silver Mountain, Self-Portrait, Catch the Rainbow, Snake Charmer, The Temple of the King, If You Don't Like Rock and Roll as well. So many awesome songs on here. A great starting point for Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. My number 8 on the list. Number 7, Toys in the Attic by Aerosmith. Aerosmith really became Aerosmith with Get Your Wings from 74, but Toys in the Attic is where they put it all together. Steven Tyler fully embraced his recognizable vocal delivery and sleazy lyrics, and Joe Perry and Brad Whitford showed amazing chemistry together on guitars. Tom Hamilton and Joey Kramer create a very tight rhythm section, and production by Jack Douglas ties it all together. This is the perfect Aerosmith record in my opinion, and chances are you hear 75% of this album on classic rock radio to this day, because it spawned classics like Sweet Emotion, of course, Walk This Way, the title track, Big 10-inch record, and more. Fantastic stuff. Like I said, the perfect Aerosmith record for me. Got to go with Toys in the Attic at number 7. Tremendous stuff here by the band, who, like I said, really found their groove, found their rhythm, and this is the album where it all came together. Number 6, let's go with Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper. Alice's first solo album after the demise of the original Alice Cooper group, and Cooper rose to solo success with the singles Department of Youth, Only Women Bleed, and the title track, alongside the immensely successful Nightmare TV special and over-the-top tour as well, which, if any of that flopped, it would have tanked Alice's solo career right away, but rather, Welcome to My Nightmare remains one of Alice's best records and eras as well, and it was definitely a calculated risk to take, but best of all, Welcome to My Nightmare is a lot of fun. It's just a fun listen here, and it's, everything you'd expect from Alice Cooper. The campy, cheesy horror. You have Bob Ezrin producing it, and most of Lou Reed's band behind Alice Cooper for this record as well. So just a lot of fun to listen to. Classic Alice through and through here with tracks like Welcome to My Nightmare, Devil's Food, Black Widow, Only Women Bleed, Department of Youth, Cold Ethel, Steven, maybe one of the best Alice Cooper songs of all time, The Awakening, and Escape. It's a cool concept. It's a lot of fun to listen to. It's all of that creepy, cheesy horror you'd expect from Alice in the mid-70s here. Just Cooper firing on all cylinders with a great first album as a solo artist. So had to put it close to the top 5. Coming in at number 6, let's go with Welcome to My Nightmare. Breaking into the top 5 here, my number 5 has got to be Fleetwood Mac's self-titled The White Album here. The first Fleetwood Mac studio album with the new addition of Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, who took the band to the next level of commercialism and success. And of course, Stevie Nicks went on to become, the star of the band. But adding Lindsey Buckingham to their lineup was an equally important pickup as well, as far as I'm concerned. Lindsey was really the heart and soul of the band, and any tours they did following, him joining the group in 75, any tours they did without him, and they did a few, it just didn't feel right, didn't feel the same, didn't really feel like the essence of Fleetwood Mac. And so he was so crucial to the band's songwriting, their production, their live shows. So I think, he was an equally important pickup, to Stevie Nicks and what she brought to the band in terms of commercialism. But, I love his guitar work, and I'm So Afraid, especially on the live versions with the extended solo, which is, great stuff. And I think the Fleetwood Mac stuff prior to Stevie and Lindsey joining the band was fantastic as well. I'm a big Peter Green fan, but after he left, the band went through a transitional period, and this is where they came out of it stronger than ever, I should say, with standouts on here like Monday Morning, Blue Letter, Rhiannon, Over My Head, Crystal, Say You Love Me, Landslide, World Turning, and like I mentioned, I'm So Afraid. Fantastic stuff. Classic here by Fleetwood Mac, turning 50. Coming in at number 5, let's go with the White Album, self-titled. Awesome album. Number 4, Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin. Should this have been a single record? I think possibly. I think there's definitely some fat they could have trimmed off of it, but Zeppelin fans will fight you to the death over that. It's still a stellar album as is. Some tracks on here were written previously during sessions for past releases. This is also the band's first to be released on Swan Song Records, and I love the range shown on here, from hard rock to prog, folk, even a little heavy metal at times. And some standouts for me include The Rover, In My Time of Dying, which happens to be my favorite Zeppelin song of all time. You have Trampled Underfoot, the classic Kashmir, Houses of the Holy, 10 Years Gone, and more. Top 3 now, let's go with A Night at the Opera by Queen. I love the diverse nature of this record. It really touches all bases of Queen's sound. You want your metal tracks, you have Sweet Lady and Death on Two Legs. You want your accessible radio pop, you have You're My Best Friend. Even some proggy moments with 39. And then, of course, there's Bohemian Rhapsody, considered by many to be the greatest rock song of all time. And it seems like people are in two camps. Either you think Stairway to Heaven is the best rock song of all time, or you think Bohemian Rhapsody is the best rock song of all time. Personally, I'd have to go with A Day in the Life by the Beatles over both of them, but Bohemian Rhapsody is no doubt a masterpiece and probably what this album is best known for. But, these days, probably the song from this record that I listen to the least. I've heard it to death on classic rock radio over the years, and so I don't have that frequent urge to go out and listen to it on my own. But the more time goes on, the more I gravitate towards some of the deeper cuts on here, like Seaside Rendezvous and the previously mentioned 39 and Death on Two Legs. But that's just a testament to how strong this record is, and how much it has to offer. And as legendary as it is, Bohemian Rhapsody is like the icing on the cake of an already great record. So with that in mind, had to include A Night at the Opera in the top 3 here. Coming in at number 3, great album by Queen, all-time great classic record here, and probably best known, like I said, for Bohemian Rhapsody, but the album has so much else to offer as well. Number 2, I'm going to go with Sabotage by Black Sabbath, the last great Sabbath record of the Ozzy era, closing out their 6-album run of legendary records, from their debut through Sabotage, and this is the follow-up to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, of course, and, the album that followed Sabotage, Technical Ecstasy, is pretty underrated as well, but not quite on the same level as their first 6 records. And so what's so great about the classic string of Sabbath records is the evolution of their sound and how they seem to get more experimental in the studio with each release in such a short amount of time. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is probably the band's most adventurous record, but Sabotage sees the band continuing to branch out to a bit more of a progressive approach on Megalomania and The Writ, maybe even inventing thrash metal on Symptom of the Universe, and things got really experimental with Super Czar featuring the English Chamber Choir, and Am I Going Insane, which is an annoyingly catchy and unsubtly commercial radio track. But, still great stuff, right? Very diverse record, kind of all over the place, but very consistent at the same time, if that makes any sense. And the band was going through, a ton of legal issues against their former management at the time, which served as inspiration for some of the band's, lyrical content on this record. And it's such, like I said, a diverse but consistent album, and you can really take your pick for which of the first 6 Sabbath records is your favorite. Personally, for me, it's got to be Sabotage, so had to put it close to the top here at number 2. Going to go with Sabotage from 75 by Black Sabbath. And finally, coming in at number 1, there can only be one personal favorite album from 1975, and for me, it's gotta be Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. And, my favorite Pink Floyd album changes all the time. Sometimes it's The Wall, sometimes it's Dark Side of the Moon, sometimes it's Metal or Animals, sometimes it's even the Final Cut, but most of the time it's Wish You Were Here. Just a perfect album from top to bottom, no filler, nothing to trim off. You have Shine On You Crazy Diamond, all parts to bookend the record, just amazing. A phenomenal composition there. You have Welcome to the Machine, Have a Cigar, featuring Roy Harper on lead vocals. Always loved that collaboration. Always thought Roy Harper did a fantastic job, and that song really fit his voice well. And then, of course, the title track, Wish You Were Here. Just flawless stuff here from Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright in the midst of their golden era, paying tribute to founding member Syd Barrett. So, that said, coming in at number 1, my favorite rock and metal album from 1975 has got to go to Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. So that wraps up this video here, taking a look at my favorite rock and metal albums from 1975, turning 50 this year. You guys can see my picks right over here. Definitely still feeling and sounding a bit under the weather, but I was excited to get this video out and talk about rock and metal in 75, what a stacked year it was. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel down below, turn on the bell for notifications so you don't miss a new upload, and be sure to let me know down in the comment section below what are your thoughts on my picks and what are some of your favorite rock and metal releases from 1975. I want to hear from you. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.